A very good afternoon to all of you. Wish you all a very happy new year. This 20th episode from the product management series marks our first session of the year 2020. As you are aware, today's topic is very significant and cogent in terms of creating fantastic products. Building products that customers love is something I believe every product manager aspire for. I have with me Avinash Ganesh, Director, Product Management in Mobilium, who will share his perspective on building products which are liked and loved by the customers. Two more things from my side. You can ask questions anytime during the session. Avinash will answer them, most of them, keeping the time limit in mind after the presentation. Do not forget to leave your feedback, which will help me better my future sessions. Over to you, Avinash, and thank you so much for accepting this invite.
Thank you, Ankita. Can you hear me well?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, okay, brilliant. Thanks, Ankita. And, I would like to first thank NASSCOM for the great work that it has been doing. It has helped various professionals over the years, and I know that for a fact because it has tremendously helped me personally, right? Let me explain how. Uh, my career has spanned for over 17 years. And for the first half of my career, I played various roles in engineering, ranging from being a developer to a product architect. And then in the second half, I made a switch to the product management side of the house. And when I was new in product management, I was trying to figure out how things worked in this world. And that's when I came across this workshop conducted jointly by IPMA and NASSCOM called Product Management Express. This was many, many years back. But some of the concepts and topics that were covered in this workshop, especially by Manish in the module that he covered. Manish now heads Twitter India. But some of the concepts that I learned there has greatly influenced my thinking as a product manager. In fact, a lot of the topics that we're going to talk about today is also influenced by what I learned in that workshop. But not just in that workshop, right? As I've put in many years of work in the product management space, there have been many other sources of learning, from mentors to books to podcasts. And I will share during the course of this presentation at the end some of these references, and I hope these references are going to be helpful for some of you as well. Now, thank you once again, NASSCOM, for firstly helping me in my career and now giving me an opportunity to contribute back to this community, right? And I hope that this session is worth the 1 hour of investment that all of you have put in, for those of you who have dialed into the session now. Now, all of us understand that the role of product managers is quite challenging, right? Especially so for managing tech products. Not discounting the product management for non-tech products, but for tech products, it's even more challenging because you're at the intersection of business, design, and technology, right? And all of these are very complementary skills, and you need to be at the heart of all of that, right? And so, as a product manager, the kind of competencies that you need to have is to have a deep understanding of the problems that your users or your customers are facing, which segment of these users problems is what you want to solve with your product, right? And how does your customers solve for these problems or this need of theirs? How do they get it addressed if your product did not exist? Is it going to be with another vendor's product, or is it with some kind of as an example, a script on Excel that the customer has written himself, right? And more importantly, how big is this problem, or how big is the need that needs to be addressed? How many people will love to use this product if you ended up building a product to solve for this problem or to address this need? In other words, how big is the marketplace for the product that I'm going to build, right? So all of these competencies are very important in order for a product manager to set a vision for this product. And that will enable his organization to invest their passion, their energy, and in the interest in order to make your product a success, right? But once you've understood the problem statement, the need, the marketplace, it's then now to strategize, right? It's time for strategizing. Here, you first synthesize a solution for this problem that you want to solve, the need that you want to address, and you will do as you do that. you need to have capabilities to be able to articulate the value proposition of your product, right? Now, how does it make business sense for your customers to invest in your product? Not just about how this product is going to solve that problem or address that need, right? Secondly, you'll have to be clear about the pricing strategy. This can be a discussion topic by itself. It's so vast. For example, it could be a perpetual license. It could be pay for a specific term, like monthly recurring pay or yearly recurring pay, pay per use. Right, in the B2B context, it's even more complex because you can have an enterprise-wide license, you can have a per seat license, you can have licenses that scale based on the number of subscribers or users the enterprise is serving, and so on and so forth, right? So it's a topic that is so massive in itself that I can't be getting into the details of each of these, but I will try and see how we can strengthen these competencies through the course of this discussion. Next, coming back to the topic, you work on your go-to-market strategy, right? How do you want to take this to your customers? Is it through direct sales? Is it through partner sales? Right? What channels you want to use for promoting or marketing your product? Right? That is what you would do as part of your strategy exercise. And finally, in terms of your strategy, you need to have a clear thought of what you want to get built by when, and more importantly, why. Right? That's your roadmap. The why part is important because you need to be clear about what you want to learn about the marketplace as you evolve your product. Right? It's not just that you learned once during your market research activity. You have to constantly keep learning how the market space is evolving, and that learning is very important because if you have a specific hypothesis and you built a roadmap based on that, if you don't learn and if you don't find that some of your hypotheses or assumptions are false, you will end up building things that potentially are not required, right, and wasting a lot of energy, right? So having a good understanding of the marketplace is extremely important. Now moving on to the planning and the product build process itself. The first thing here is the prioritization, right? Now, prioritization of the key initiatives that you have in mind to build your product, and I cannot emphasize the importance of that enough, right? That's really important. For example, you may have a ton of ideas of what you want to build, and these ideas, for example, if you're building products for an enterprise market, could be for various industry verticals like healthcare, like finance, like insurance or telecom, right? And it covers the breadth of these various verticals. Or alternatively, you can say, I'll cover a lot of use cases for a single industry vertical and things like that, right? Now, uh, my experience has always been in the B2B space through my career. So I would be giving a lot of B2B examples. So B2C guys, if you're out there, and please bear with me. Now, coming back to the priorities, these priorities that you set is only effective when a PM has good understanding of the marketplace, right? Else you will not know if what you have prioritized first up is what is going to provide the biggest bang for the buck that your company is investing in, right? And so that is where you do your planning, but then you go on to the do the experiment design and defining the requirements, right? These are the other aspects of planning, but we will understand a little more details of what I mean by experiment design or defining requirements in a little more detail during the course of this discussion. And then you move on to developing the product itself. Remember, the purpose of what you want to build is to facilitate the learning. And we will talk a little bit more about that with examples, right? I keep emphasizing these experiments and this learning, and I think it'll become a little more clear during the course of this discussion. Now, the planning and the development process is very iterative, right? And once you've iterated enough and have learned enough about your marketplace, and you're now confident that whatever product you're going to launch is going to serve well the needs of the segment that you initially identified, that's when you go about executing your go-to-market strategy that you had set out as part of your strategy exercise, right? And once you have done that, you then get into the launch process where you enable your sales team. Either it could be a direct sales or it could be channel sales, depending on what is the sales channel that you've chosen. You decide on your marketing channels for generation of leads, right? You help with designing the marketing campaigns and so on, right? Now these competencies that I have listed here are by no means exhaustive. I've just listed some of the competencies that I believe will significantly get strengthened with some of the techniques that we're going to talk about in today's discussion, right? And that's the reason for me to talk about only these specific competencies. But like I mentioned, PMs have to have competencies in a vast, wide areas of work, and so let's dive into the techniques itself that I want to talk about today. Now, coming to the first and most important aspect, how you understand your market landscape better, right? Essentially, there are two broad ways into which any research technique can be classified, right? They are primary research and secondary research. Primary research is information about the marketplace that you have gathered through self-constructed research methods, while secondary research is information that you have gathered through previously conducted studies, right? So for primary research, some of the techniques that you will employ are, and we'll look at all of these in a lot of detail, but the things that you would employ is to do interviews, to observe users in their natural environment, to conduct surveys, to do in-person customer visits, and so on, right? Now, the secondary research is where typically the research activity begins, right? This is because secondary research will provide the product manager with the basis of knowledge on relevant information that is that is already being compiled by someone else, and that helps you get a better understanding of your marketplace, right? And those could be through articles, could be online data published, say, by the government or by a regulatory body, as an example, or by looking at research reports, statistics from some of the players like Gartner's or the McKinsey's, the Big Fours, or any other research organization who is researching in the area in which your product operates. But the key to note is primary research is what fills in all the gaps. Secondary research leaves you with a lot of gaps so secondary research helps with covering the breadth, right? But you want to get in the depth of a specific area, specific problem of the marketplace that you want to solve for, and that's where the primary research really shines, right? Now, while it is important and a great starting point, I'm not going to be spending a lot of time today on secondary research. In today's discussion, I will spend a lot of effort on primary research techniques. And the point that is mentioned here about customer visits in primary research, I cannot emphasize enough the importance of this, right? I've heard product managers say, right, I do not have to visit customers. My sales team or my professional services team or my support organization, they're always in front of the customers and they're bringing me back enough information, enough insights, right? For me, that just does not cut it, right? If some of you product managers are out there in that category, uh, um, I'm sorry to say this, but this is, in my experience, not good enough, right? I'm not discounting the need for a product manager to be well connected to various organizations, including the customer-facing organizations, to get a pulse of how your product is performing. But you need to be in front of the customers, right? I also have product managers who tell me that I do visit customers, some of the key customers, maybe once a quarter, once in 6 months, to present the roadmap. But when you inquire further, you find out that this is typically a presentation for a couple of hours in a conference room in front of 25 people and things like that, right? I'm not saying that this is no good or it's not helpful, right? That's definitely helpful because there is an interaction that you're having with real people, with people who are using your product, and you will learn a lot from these conversations, whether your roadmap ideas are good enough, not good, whether your current version of the product is working well for them, it's not working, etc., etc., right? And in such settings, you also have a chance to speak to the business sponsor, right? Especially in a B2B context, you have business sponsors in such meetings, and they can give you an understanding of whether the current version of the product is delivering value for them or not, right? Those are the people who are trying to constantly monitor and measure value for the products that they've invested in, right? I also have product managers who tell me that, I'm on a plane visiting customers every week. I've traveled enough in my life, and, I don't want to travel any further, right? But again, when you check further, you find out that they're typically traveling in a pre-sales capacity, helping sales team in their sales process, right? Again, they would typically be presenting in a conference room with a lot of people and things like that. So once again, I'm not saying that this is no good. It is helpful as you understand the kind of objections or challenges your sales team is facing when they try and pitch this product, right? And you're doing it in different regions, so you get various regional diversity in terms of challenges and objections faced, right? As you help handle these objections, your salesperson is sort of learning from you, and he can use that learning as they get into other accounts. And it also helps you as you're doing, say, a company-wide sales enablement activity. You can talk through anecdotal evidences about what happened in your conversation one-on-one with during some of these presentations, and you can help them in doing objection handling much better, right? So any type of customer visit, customer interaction is definitely very good, and not visiting customers for me it's not so good for product managers, right? Now, I know that there will be practical challenges in some cases, financial challenges in some organizations for travels to happen, and in order for in such situations you to do effective as possible primary research. Let's see what can be done, right? Yeah. Now, obviously, the best thing that you could be doing, next best thing that you could be doing is talking with customers on a phone, right? You just pick up the phone, call up a user face to face, call up a user on your phone, and you would then have your conversation to understand how your product is working. What kind of conversation we need to have, let's look at it in the next slide. But then for me, observing customers in their natural environment is the best way to learn about your market, right? When you do a sizable number of these observations with different user groups, with different experiments in mind, then very quickly you understand the needs of the marketplace, right? So we will understand a lot more about why I believe this, and I hope you will see the importance of it as well. Now, coming to talking with customers, either on phone or face to face, let's look at what should you be doing in order for these conversations to be effective, right? Firstly, try to make it one-on-one, and preferably face to face, like I mentioned, right? Because the user now feels very important. It's like, okay, this PM has traveled all the way, has come to meet me, and this PM has the power to resolve my issues as much as possible, or power to realize some of the ideas that I have for improving the product, right? So they feel empowered. They typically open up, and they share a lot of valuable insights with you, right? Now, doing this in a group of 25 people, in some of the examples I mentioned earlier, in a conference room, in most cases, the way I've seen it, is not very effective. Again, I'm talking from a B2B context. Things could be very different in a B2C context. I don't have a lot of experience there, so pardon me if you don't believe in that. But when you're speaking to, say, 25 users in a conference room, in a B2B context, it's typically the manager of that users who would be doing most of the talking based on what he or she has heard from the subordinates during the day-to-day conversations, right? And when you're hearing views of how the product is performing through the lens of someone who is potentially not a user of the product, you tend to lose out on a lot of interesting detail that you really want to capture. or there is one or two star performers in that room, and you will hear them talk most of the time, and you will miss out on a possibility to understand views of other users, right? When you're building products, you want it to work not just for star performers but also for some of the low performers in the teams, right? Now, when you're sitting one-on-one in a casual environment, say in a coffee shop or in a cafeteria, that's when you get a lot of quality detailed inputs, right? What are the challenges they're facing? Who likes using the product? Who does not like using it? Why? What's the politics? And all of that, right? So people open up, give you unofficial, informal information, and those are very, very useful as you evolve your product. In a formal setting, people don't open up due to various types of worries, right? They may think, what if I'm not using the product effectively, and whatever opinion I'm putting forward, it may expose me in front of in front of my manager, in front of my peers. That could be an example for why they don't open up in a formal setting, right? Now, apart from having a one-on-one conversation in a casual setting, which I think is good, is effective, you should also be very cognizant about what conversation you're having there, right? You should ask a good mix of open-ended and close-ended questions for getting good qualitative insights, quantitative inputs, right? So close-ended questions would be like, how many users typically log in per day, right? Or how often do you access a specific dashboard or a specific report in the system, right? Or how many minutes of savings per event you're achieving with the new release that we recently provided, right? So those kinds of close-ended questions. But for me, open-ended questions is what gives you a lot of interesting qualitative insights. Like, you could ask, what do you think are the top things that work for you? What are the top things that don't work for you in the product? Right? What do you do after accessing this particular report in the product, and things like that, right? And when they provide an answer, you can have a lot of follow-up questions. Just follow their process by asking, but why is that? Or tell me more. Or and then what happened, right? And things like that, right? What did you do after that, right? So those are a lot of follow-up questions that you can ask. And while you ask these questions, engage in a lot of active listening. The key is to understand what emotions your users are going through as they're using the product, right? Are they feeling ecstatic, or are they feeling frustrated, right? Or is it anxiety that something is not going to work because it's not worked a few times in the past, or they feel assured that it's always going to work based on their past experience, or it's just too painful, or it's just pleasing to the eye, right? You need to understand what emotions your users are going through as they're using the product, right? And that's really, really powerful. But moving on, I have been talking about the importance of observing users in their natural environment, right? Observe what users do versus what they say, right? For all of those PMs who go out there on roadmap presentations or on pre-sales pitches, if you find one or two situations where someone in the audience interrupts you and tells you, hey, but I'm using the product in so and so way, and this is what I do, or something like that, right? That's when you throw in an idea of, hey, that's crazy, or that's awesome. I want to see how you achieve that. Can I sit with you or somebody else in this room, post this presentation for about 10-15 minutes, provided time permits, or you don't have any other preset engagement. Uh, More often than not, when I do that, I see the users finding some way, some time to give you, to share more details about what they just talked about in that room, right? They tend to typically open up, right? Sitting with users in their natural environment gives you the best view of a day in the life of a user, right? Nothing comes close to doing sitting with the user in their natural environment, at their desk or in the warehouse, wherever it is that your product is getting used. But why is it so important? Why do I have such a strong feeling about that, right? So let's say you're building a bill payment application, right? And you're doing research, primary research for what all needs to be there in that particular software application, right? And you're speaking to a finance professional in an organization. This person is doing payments based on paper bills that he has to process and make payments, right? That's his job description. So you're sitting with him at a coffee shop and asking him, so how does your desk look like on a typical work day, right? So he will say that there is a section on the desk where I have all of these bills to be paid, which are stacked based on its due date. There is this other section where I store all the items that I need to take care of, but maybe not so important to be taken care of immediately or urgently, right? So you then come back and draw a picture of how the desk looks like, right? You will probably come up with a picture like what you have on the slide here, right? Is it not? But really, if you went and looked at that desk, there is a very strong chance that it looks like this. Right? So this is where I do not enjoy webinars, Ankita. It's great to hear out the audience burst out into laughter if I were to present this in a face-to-face live environment, right? So that just is to reemphasize the need for doing things face-to-face. You just understand body language much better. You are able to connect with people much better. It just doesn't work so well in a remote setting. But anyway, coming back to what we were talking about. Now, if you were to write requirements for your bill payment application on the basis of what you heard from that user, you will miss out on a lot of details, right? So if you went in and looked at this desk, you will have a lot of follow-up questions. Like, you will ask, what are those post-it notes and reminders that you have there? What is it for? You have a notebook there where you're noting down something every time you do a payment. What is that, right? So these are a lot of details that you want to really capture and build into your software, because that is what eventually will get used, because those are practical scenarios, right? This is just to illustrate the need for observing users in their natural environment, right? But why do people do this, right? Why do they hide things from you or provide partial truth or sometimes even lie to you, right? Because people like to say things which are socially acceptable, right? And that's the reality. That's the truth. That's how people work. That's how people behave, right? If there is a set of business processes to be followed, you will, while talking and explaining, you will say that I'm following these set processes in my day-to-day work, even if you're deviating from that process 50% of the times, right? So I'll give you another example, right? So when me and my wife were talking about cleaning the house, we say, okay, let's do that regularly. Let's do it once every month, say first Saturday of every month, right? So we do it for the first month, we do it for the second month, third month we say, hey, let's just go out for lunch today, or let's go out of town for a holiday, or fourth month we say it's clean, yeah, let's do it next month. I think it's fine, right? And so on and so forth. But then a friend comes in that evening and says, hey, how often do you guys clean your house? It looks pretty clean, right? You say, hey, once every month, yeah, first Saturday, right? So you tend to say things that you think you're doing, right? You tend to say things that you want to do, but in a lot of cases there are exceptions to it, and you don't want to mention about that. That's how people are. But if you really had data to figure out that behavior, you will start to observe that these exceptions are are there first. Then you will need to understand why these exceptions are being made, and you're not following a set process, right? That is when you're truly able to understand what is the problem or what is the barrier a user is facing to follow a set process. It is with this understanding and with this empathy to users that you can build a great understanding of the landscape in which your product will operate, right? So when you go out there and have these observations and discussions, it's critical that you have a customer notebook where you capture these inputs, right? So you capture information like, who is the person that you went and spoke to? What's the persona? What's the role that the guy is doing in the organization? What are they trying to do? What problem or barrier they're solving? Where is it occurring? When is it occurring? Why is it happening? right? And how did they deal with it when that particular issue happened, right? All of these things is what you want to capture. The other thing that I do, being a product manager for software product, is that I have the opportunity to request for a recording of the screen capture as people are going through the usage of the product, including the audio conversation, right? The whole conversation is then recorded, right? Uh, uh, and this is one way for me to not forget every single insight that I have picked up during the conversation, right? The other thing that it helps me with is that when I get back and have a conversation with my designer, UX guys, or engineering teams, I can show them this recording, and then that really helps us as we brainstorm our next evolution of the product, right? So capturing what you saw, what you heard is extremely important. And once you've captured, you may want to then translate that into a set of problem statements, right? So you'll come back, you'll make a compilation of the various problem statements. See, curation is very important. Out of everything that you heard and saw, you have to curate and find out what are the most important insights that you want to pick up, right? And the recommended template for the curated problem statements is you talk in terms of the user that you spoke to, right? And you say, I am so and so person playing so and so role, so and so persona within the organization. I'm trying to achieve so and so thing, but then I faced this issue because there was this other system that was not providing me some information, something like that, and that made me really frustrated. Right, so capturing the emotion is really important, right? And that you at the end of the day, the product that you build should provide a very strong positive emotion. Unless you're doing that, you're not going to build products that customers love, right? Now, just to summarize everything that we talked about in terms of the primary research, right? You need to observe users in their current environment, either current users or potential users. If there is one thing and just one thing that you pick up from this conversation, I believe it has to be this. This has just worked wonders for me in in strengthening various competencies. I'll explain why later as well, right? Beyond what I talked about earlier. This is very important, right? Pay attention to behavior and not what they say they do. Understand what goals the user is trying to achieve and how they're doing it, right? A very important first step to building successful product, or products that customers love, is accomplished when you have a strong understanding of what the user or customer is doing, right? So now that you have done your primary research, you understood the need for a product, you understood the market space, market landscape much better. Now, what are the techniques you're going to use in order to translate this into product, right? First, you need to create a bold vision of why you want to build this product, right? As Simon Sinek says, start with the why. Why you need to build this product. Should be in the form of a strong vision statement. Second, you need to be able to create a business model for your product. We will look at how to do that in subsequent slides. Third and extremely important part is to run experiments with customers, right? The key is to run experiments with customers using a lean approach. And we will also briefly look at how to do this during the course of this discussion. Right, so the first thing that we talked about in the three-step process for product build is having an inspiring product vision, right? And that is what helps deliver awesome products. A product vision is more than just a statement, right? It's a belief in how your product will impact the lives of those who you serve, right? It aligns with the team's passion and obsession to deliver nothing less than awesome. So when you're creating your vision statement, think of the following things, right? Who has the biggest pain, and be very specific and narrow. Which type of users have this pain? Be aware of who you're not designing your product for, right? What is in scope, what is out of scope should be very clear. And what is the biggest pain point you're focusing on? And what is that insight which made you believe that's the biggest pain point to focus on. And what is that insight that makes you believe that you can solve this problem, right? These are some of the things that you need to keep in mind. Maybe let's take an example. Let's say you're building a product for people to scan their visiting cards directly into the phone contacts. Who would you be building this for, right? So it would be for someone like a sales guy who's collecting a lot of visiting cards per day. And what's the biggest pain this person is going through, right? There's a high chance of losing or misplacing this card and hence losing the contact info itself. And why do you think you can solve that problem? Because you've seen smartphones have cameras, and there are a lot of apps these days that can streamline data entry without having to enter a single word, right? So basis this situation, the vision statement that you will probably be coming up with is, my product will help in digitizing visiting card contact information onto your smartphone in less than 50 seconds or less than 5 seconds, whatever, right? So be very specific about what you want to build, and it could also be a very big grand vision, right? So but be very specific about what it is. Now that you have a vision, the next thing that you want to do is to have a business model, right? A good approach to capturing a business model is to use the lean canvas. That's worked very well for me, and that's why I think this is a good way to capture a business model. The various things that you capture here is capture the customer segment that you want to target, like which industry vertical I will go after. In that industry vertical, will I be going after tier ones or tier ones and tier twos, right? And within that organization, what are the personas I'll be going after? Is it somebody in the finance organization, somebody in the operations organization, engineering organization, whatever it is, right? Next, you list down who you think are going to be your early adopters, right? For those of you who don't know or don't understand the concept of early adopters, I would recommend that you read the book Crossing the Chasm by Jeffrey Moore. It's an awesome book. It really helps you understand various types of customers, not just early adopters. But I will not get into details of explaining what is meant by early adopters. I just don't have the time for that today, right? Now, list the top 3 problems that this segment of user that you want to target faces, and what are the alternatives that they have today. Is it that they're using some other product? Is it that they're using some kind of manual automation, whatever it is, right? But once you've understood your segment and what problem you want to solve, you then have to be able to come up with a single, clear, compelling, unique value proposition that turns your unaware audience into somebody who's interested, right? This is what we call as the elevator pitch, right? By the time you get hold of someone entering an elevator, and by the time they leave the elevator, you should be able to sell what is your product all about, right? That's the elevator pitch. And you can use a high level concept, for example, to do that, right? So you can say, I want to build a sales force for signaling firewalls. Or if the example that you have here is, if you are going to have a high level concept for YouTube, if you're building YouTube as a product, you would say it's Flickr for videos, right? Flickr came in earlier than YouTube, and you would say it's Flickr for videos or something like that, right? So some very short, clear, crisp, compelling statement which explains what your product is all about and what it's trying to do. Next, you tell what is the solution. How do you think you're going to solve for this problem? What are the key matrices you will track, right? What's the customer acquisition rate, or the customer stickiness, or the churn rate? What's the profitability or margin that you're doing on your product? All of these aspects, right? The key matrices that you want to cover is very important. You have to think that through very well as you're strategizing. Then you would look at what would be the sources of revenue that you expect for your product. What is the pricing structure you're going to have in order to get these revenue streams in. Then you look at what would be the cost structure, both your capex and your opex cost, right? What's your upfront investment? What's your monthly, yearly recurring investment? get your product going, right? So you have to have a good understanding of your cost structure. Then you need to know what is the entry barriers, right? What is the unfair advantage that you are in? Why is it that somebody else can't build it? What is the entry barrier that you're creating yourself? Entry barrier that you're creating for your competition in order for them to not so easily get into this space, right? That's what helps you be a leader in the space. And finally, what are the channels you will be using to reach out to your customers, right? So that's extremely important. Now moving on to so you have a business model that you've prepared, you have a vision that you've created, you have to now build your product, right? At this point in time is when PMs typically wonder how should I go about, or how should I proceed, what should I prioritize, and things like that, right? Among the various opinions and behaviors that are observed as part of my primary research, which one should I be considering first? If for example, these opinions were very contrasting, which features are essential to have a successful product? Which ones are good to have? Which ones are essential, right? Having that distinction is important. What can be changed safely? And what are the things that, if changed, will anger the customers? Right? What might please today's customers at the expense of tomorrow's, right? So there are a lot of these questions that you have when you're setting out to build the product. And more often than not, what I see is PMs end up doing this, right? They say, let's just ship it and see what happens, right? That's the approach. Let's ship it and see what happens. If that is the plan, then you will definitely be successful, because you will definitely see what happens, right? But what is important is to have validated learning. And that is where the lean approach that I have over here is most useful, right? It involves true experiments that follow a scientific method. And that is why it sort of transforms or translates an art into a science, because as you did in your high school experiments, it begins with a clear hypothesis that makes predictions about what is supposed to happen at the end of this experiment, and then you test these predictions empirically, right? So the goal of every experiment is to discover and learn how to build a sustainable business around the vision and strategy that you have defined, right? And the hypothesis or the assumption that we're talking about, the leap of faith assumption that we're talking about first up as a first step in the build process, is that most important assumption that you think your idea will solve, right? So then once you have that assumption in place, you build the absolutely minimal product that is required to test out your assumption or test out your hypothesis, right? Be clear about what matrices you want to learn as you design your experiment. And once you have done your experiment, review the matrices from your experiment, right? What did you learn? Did your hypothesis pass or did it fail? And if it failed, then do you want to pivot, or do you want to change the idea, or do you want to continue and run additional experiments, right? Right. So while the loop we are talking about here is build, measure, and learn, for having validated learning, you need to be clear about what you want to learn. The key is that, right? What do you want to learn? Do I want to learn if the customer acquisition rate is going to be higher if I build this feature? Yes, that's what you want to learn, right? If you want to learn that, then what are the matrices you want to be capturing? Customer acquisition rate, that's the metrics I want to measure. And if I want to measure that, then what's the bare minimum that I need to build? The key there is the bare minimum, right? And hence this version of the product is called minimum viable product, right? What I just described is a very powerful practical technique, but I think we need to understand this better with an example, right? Ankita, I think I have only 1 minute, so I'll try and make this quick. But I think this example is important, right? So I will not be sharing an example of the products that I manage, because I will then have to get deep into the telecom domain to explain the experiments. But let's look at an example that everyone can relate to, right? Today, if you had to order a dress or a shoe from an Amazon or Flipkart, there are a lot of us out there who will do it without any hesitation, right? But if you were to do it 20 years back in 1999, then would you? I don't think so, right? I don't. In There's a high possibility you say no chance. This was the idea that Nick Sherman had. He had an idea for an online shoe sale platform, and this was in 1999, right? He was frustrated that there was no central site where we have a great collection of shoes. He had to go from shop to shop to shop. He was so picky about the shoe he wanted, right? Now, in order for building a platform to fulfill his idea, imagine everything that he had to do, right? With warehouse management, stocking up the inventory, to distribution partners, to logistic management, to promotion, to sales, a lot of things, right? Instead, he started with an experiment. What was his hypothesis? His hypothesis was that customers are willing to buy shoes online. And that was a bold statement to make a bold assumption to make in 1999. So to test it, what did he do? So he began asking local shops to take pictures of their inventory. And in exchange for permission to take pictures, he would post these pictures online and come back to buy the shoes at full price if a customer bought them online, right? So this way, he started with a simple and small product without any inventory, without any warehouse investments. And as they did that, they not just validate if customers would buy this, but also other things about taking payments, handling returns, dealing with customer support, a lot of things that they learned, right? So if you spend 2 years building your first version of the product based on research, you will lose on the opportunity to actually learn from actual real customer behavior with your product, with live customers, right? And if something is not working, if some of your assumptions are proving to be false, you can very quickly pivot and do other experiments to learn faster, right? In the first year, right? In the first year between 1999 and 2000, his company had a $1.6 million in gross sale, right? And in 2009, 10 years into the company, it was acquired by Amazon for $1.2 billion, right? So that was a very successful approach to using lean. And I think it's really powerful. All of us, a lot of us, I think, use these approaches at least in partial capacities where possible. But this is extremely powerful, right? I wanted to do a case study, but I think we are out of time. So if there are no questions, we'll do this case study, Ankita. But uh, I wanted to also mention about the references in terms of books and podcasts that have worked for me, a small set relevant to this topic here. Yeah, so before I get into questions, just one last summary, right? So we talked about a lot of these competencies that a product manager needs to have, and some of these techniques, just two or three of these techniques, right, of being able to observe users in their environment, to do primary research, to have an idea to solve for that particular problem you discovered, to run experiments and learn from those experiments better about your marketplace, are very powerful things for all of these competencies, right? Right, as you speak to your users, you have a lot of anecdotal evidences for why you want to build something that, and when you provide requirements to your engineering team, you can give a lot of useful anecdotes which will make them say, oh yeah, yeah, what you're saying makes a lot of sense, and let's build it. Otherwise, they will question. They will say, architecturally this is too complex. Let's not do it. I don't think this will work. The closer a product manager is to users and the marketplace, the better positioned he is to explain his vision, explain his strategy, both internally and externally. Right? Product manager is the evangelist internally and externally, and for which having some of these techniques to strengthen these capabilities and competencies is, I think, very, very important. So I've gone 4 minutes overboard. Sorry about that, Ankita. Do you want to take some questions now?
Yeah, sure, Avinash, no problem. Thank you for the presentation. So, yeah, I have few questions. So, the first one is by Ankan. He's saying that I'm testing out a hypothesis for a new product in B2B procurement. The tiny MVPs are built within a 10-day sprint. Do you think
Mhm.
test-driven development should be followed during this time or only in the second, third iteration? What is the right time to do so?
I believe it needs to be done in every single iteration because um, what you want to do is in your first iteration, what do you want to learn about the payments, right? Do you want to learn if the payments is stable or not, right? So when you're doing payments, one of the most important things is every single time a payment is done, if that doesn't go through, people lose trust, right? It has to have 99.999 accuracy in terms of the payment going through. If it fails once and two times, then people will start doing those payments, right? So do you want to measure if the payment accuracy is strong or you want to measure something else? Be sure and clear about that one strong payment related metric that you want to test, and see if the MVP is helping you get there, right? So that's my thought on that.
All right, thanks, Avinash. The next question is by Drumel. He's asking, how do you find the right sources for primary research?
Yeah, so for primary research, like I mentioned, right, you would want to speak to your users, you want to speak to your customers firsthand, right? So uh, if you are, for example, doing an enterprise product and you have over 50,000 enterprises there that you could target, I think the question is, uh, which one of those enterprises should I pick up? Which one should I be going and speaking to, right? And that's where understanding your early adopters is the key, right? So yeah, so if you were to look at the entire B2C segment, which of those people do you think will stand in the queue before an iPhone is launched for 5 hours and then pick up the phone, right? Those are your early adopters. They want to be first in the market to have that shiny new product and explore that, etc. Right? So similarly, you need to have a good understanding of in your market segment what are those attributes exhibited by your early adopters, and out of those 50,000 enterprises, which of those enterprises exhibit this early adopter approach? Which of them are adventurous, which of them like to experiment with new things, and things like that, right? So once you have those attributes understood, you can then very quickly filter out, shortlist, and come up to a small set of handful customers that work well for you. In maybe they're in your region, hence least cost for you to go meet them. There could be several attributes that you would look at as you go meet these users. But then once you go meet these users, I think I've given enough material during this session for what you would do, what you would ask in order to understand better and have a good primary good effective primary research session.
Thanks, Avinash. Shanti Prakash is asking that when you are working on developing bespoke applications, how do we use these concepts?
Um, so what we are talking about here are generally available products, right? So we're talking about solving for a problem in a marketplace that is large, and hence anything that you build once can be repeatedly sold, right? Uh, if you're building a bespoke application, then all you need to do is whatever techniques I talked about in terms of user empathy, you just empathize with that one single user who is giving you all the requirements. Make sure that you understood the requirements well. Make sure that you keep things lean, in the sense that once you've understood the requirement, you probably have a wireframe that you build if it's a UI related bespoke work you're doing. Take that back to the customer, explain that this is what you're doing, this is the direction you're going, get feedback, uh, do the first demo, get feedback, right? So whether you're doing it for a generally applicable market or for a bespoke application, these techniques are very powerful. But when you use this in the context of building products, the returns are exponentially higher in terms of how much money your company could be making, right? So, excuse me. So, yeah, that's my answer to that, Ankita.
All right. Venkat has a question. He's asking, what are the competencies of great product managers? What are the key skills?
Yeah, so some of the competencies of product managers is what I mentioned here, right? But uh, in different stages in the life cycle of a product manager, as you go from being an individual contributor to a leader in the company, you would have to pick up various different competencies, right? So, nevertheless, wherever you are in the organization, one of the key things that you have to be is you have to be the champion. You have to be the evangelist, right? uh, a lot of times we hear this thing saying, product managers are the CEO of the product, right? But keep in mind, nobody reports to you, right? You don't have the engineering, the sales, the marketing, the support organizations reporting to you. So the only way that you can make your product a success, and for making yourself a successful product manager, is by influencing and motivating people to do what works well for your product to be successful, right? And so in order for you to do that, in order for you to be exceptionally inspiring leader, you need to have a strong understanding of your market, a strong understanding of the users. And that's why I keep coming back and harping on this thing of, understand your users well, empathize with them. And once you have that, you can, if you have to influence the engineering organization, you go back and say, these are the things, these are the different 5 conversations I had. And that's why I believe this thing needs to be built, right? People then don't doubt your credentials. If you in fact have recordings of some of those conversations and you share it with them, even better, right? So they hear it firsthand. If you're going to the sales guys, you go back and tell them, hey, these are the 5 ways in which I sold this product in 5 different situations, right? And this is why those particular customers bought from us, right? And so you are now saying, you understand the market well, you understand how this is selling in other places. So the sales guy is all ears for you immediately, right? Because he wants to achieve his quota. And if you are giving him enough ammunition to do his numbers with your product, he will sell your product, right? Instead of selling some other product by another product manager. So you need to be inspiring in and have a strong understanding of your market, strong understanding of the domain, and that's when you can be successful in the role.
All right. Ashutosh has a question. When building apps for Indians who are coming on the internet for the first time, who don't have any preconceived notions about web, how to prioritize UI UX to build the right way?
Oh, great question. I love that question, right? So then again, you need to start with your hypothesis, right? So the hypothesis that you're saying is you're going to be targeting those users who you think are going to be struggling to use a smartphone through which they're using an internet, right? You need to know what channel they're going to use to access the internet. Is it a smartphone? Is it through something else? In most cases, it's situation based on the situation that is described. I think it will be a smartphone in the Indian context, right? So then you say, okay, if I have to do that, what would be the top learning for the kind of application that I want to build, right? When this user comes in for the first time, is he clicking through all the 3 or 4 different screens that I have built, or is he just logging off after the first screen itself, right? If that is the one metric that you want to learn to see if people are going through everything that you want them to go through, then you set up an instrumentation in the product to say, okay, that's the metric that I want to capture as every user is logging into my platform and to my product, and see if that is actually getting achieved. If that's not getting achieved, sit with some of these users, 10 of them, 15 of them, see what's happening, right? So first, you got a quantitative insight saying out of 1,000, 5 of them went through all the screens. Through qualitative discussions with users, you will get to know why that is happening, right? And then you pivot, you design your app differently, and then you have a different experiment, and then you see what you want to learn from that experiment, right? So I hope that answers.
All right, let's have this one as the last question, Avinash, for the session. It'll be by Vinayak. How does one transition from tech role to a PM role in their career?
Okay, well, good question. That's what I did. So that's close to what I experienced, and yeah. So honestly, it was quite challenging, right? I come from an engineering background. I don't have an MBA. I don't know how the senior VP let me jump onto the product management role when I asked for it. I was being too audacious, but anyway, the VP thought I could do it. I instilled maybe some confidence in him based on my customer interactions, etc. But being in a tech role, you the way you typically work is you have a requirement, you have a problem, and you have to try and find a solution for that, right? And so there is a clear input, there's a clear output. When you move on to a business role, there is no clear input, right? So you're trying to figure out that, right? So the world is your opportunity, right? So you have to pick up a lot of interesting techniques for how you make sense in that madness. You have to do a lot of reading, a lot of learning, pick up some mentors who can guide you, help you in different situations. What is the best thing that you could be doing, and things like that. But the key thing is to read a lot about business. Some of these books that I have mentioned here are great starting points. Read some of these books. It will tremendously help you as you make a switch from a tech role to a product management role. I hope that answers. Yeah,
All
that's
right.
it. We're 2 minutes over time, Ankita.
Yeah, thank you so much, Avinash, for this great session. Thanks again for taking out time to contribute to the ecosystem. And also, I understand the constraint while having a webinar. We can plan a F2F, maybe a workshop in near future. And for the audience, if you happen to be in Kochi on 15th January, please attend a workshop on positive selling by Professor Sridhar, Marketing Department from IIM Kozhikode, where details are available on nasscom.in/events. And I will be meeting you all on 22nd of January on a session from the GTM series. For more details, please visit nasscom.in/events in 3 to 4 days. Thank you so much, Avinash, and thank you everyone for coming and joining us.
Thanks, Ankita. My pleasure.
Thank you.